Hi, I'm Julian Ryan. I'm the chair of the Stories and Organization SIG, which is part of the National Story Network. And I'm delighted to be here and inviting you to join us for the October Story Lab. Today, we have a very, very special guest. It is Ellen Cosgrove, and who's going to present our dinner and dialogue using food and storytelling to connect, build trust, and strengthen community. So welcome, Ellen. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And before I begin, we'll let the mic hand it over to you. I'm going to also just give you a little bit of her background. Ellen has a background in peace building, community building, and a master's from Brandeis in coexistence and conflict. She is a facilitator who runs a dialogue project called Dinner and Dialogue and a community building, and she runs a community building consultancy called Community in Context. She created a bridging methodology that uses food to bring people together, foster mutual understanding, and build community. And she runs virtual and in-person programs around the themes of home, community, identity, resilience, and hope. So welcome, Ellen, and I'm going to switch the mic over to you. And it's your show now to take it. And then just walk us through as you go what your expectations for all of us are today. And then I'm just going to pin you so you get to be the prime speaker.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Julianne, for inviting me, and Sarah. Really appreciate this. I have a lot of respect for storytellers, and it's important work, what you are all doing.
Thank you.
And so today I'm going to start with my story. So I'm going to take you all through kind of like where I came from and what led me to create this project, and a little bit about my work of what I'm doing now with it. And then also, we're then going to turn it over to you and have you all share a little short story about food, what food kind of represents a part of your identity. So, so I'm going to talk for a little while, but then I'm going to do what I do best, which is facilitate. But I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see that? Yeah, okay, great. So let me just move this over a little bit. Okay, so yeah, so really I think the path hasn't exactly been direct. Dinner and Dialogue has come to fruition through really the sum of my past experiences. And so I'm going to start with my story and what led me to where I am today. And I'm going to do this with help from some pictures, because I also feel like pictures really help share stories really well. So, all right. And of course, there's going to be a lot of pictures of food as well. So, so I grew up in Albany, New York, in a rather large family, and meals were an important part of my family's way of staying connected, and still are to this day. And we, always kind of had some incredibly deep and interesting talks and debates around the table, and we still do. And I've always had a pretty irrational love of food, and I helped in the kitchen when I was growing up. And I think probably my initial driver was when I figured out I could bake something that I wasn't normally allowed to have, like chocolate chip cookies. And that got me really interested in cooking. And we grew up very simply, and food was the way we celebrated. So examples being the donuts we make on Halloween, and we still make to this day, the ice cream cakes my mom would make for my birthday, the pineapple that my dad would always buy for breakfast on Christmas Day, and the cheese popcorn, which was a simple but special snack that my grandfather, who I never had a chance to meet, used to make, and then this recipe's been passed down. So these food and traditions really marked my childhood and still connect me to that time now. So when I was 20, I left the country for the first time, and I studied abroad in Rome, Italy. And it really was this incredibly inspiring experience. I just remember when I first walked into a market in Rome and just saw all the colors and sights and smells, and just was so inspired. And I think it's really where I began to learn about the world through trying different food. And when I was 25, I took a job in Northern Ireland working for a nonprofit that uses basketball as a way to bring people together. in that relatively still divided post-conflict context. And here I learned about conflict, I learned about the devastating effects of the cycle of violence, I learned about fear, about trauma, but I also learned about the possibility of connection and change. Here I had the privilege to facilitate some pretty tough conversations with people who had every right, to distrust each other and, and not like each other, but I was able to see that they could get past their fear of the other. And they were, through kind of like these moments of connection, and when they were really able to see the humanity in the other. And another important part of my role, kind of beyond like facilitating conversation with kids, as there's a picture there of, was that I had to visit our partners in the community, and building relationships and trust was really important with them. So every time I showed up at a school, a community center, or a nonprofit office, or even a government building, the first thing I was offered was tea and biscuits. And it was over these many, many, many cups of tea and probably too many biscuits that I listened to people's stories. And it was through these meetings that I helped build trust with the people that we worked with every day. So after living in Belfast, I went to Brandeis to get my master's, and it was an incredible opportunity to learn from practitioners from all over the world. And there was this Thanksgiving potluck event that we had where the whole program was invited and everyone was encouraged to bring a dish. And it was here that I saw how excitedly people talked about the food from their families, from their country, from their traditions. And it also was this really interesting container where I got to learn so much about my colleagues in a different setting. And for my field project, I went to grad school, in grad school, I went to Uganda and Kenya. And here, I just really made so many connections while traveling with people through food. A couple short memorable moments where it was the moment where I was a friend taught me how to make chapati, and I shared a meal with her and her family, which is what the photo is of there. And then, or there was this moment when I stayed in a hotel for several weeks, and the people who worked at the hotel had kind of taken me under their wing. And there was one night they knocked on my door and they brought me out, and they had made this special dish for me that they didn't let me pay for, but they just really wanted to share this special dish with me. It just was one of those wonderful connections that happens when you sometimes are alone at the other end of the world, and when people really take care of you. And so it was during this time in school when I began thinking about the idea of using food as a tool to bring people together, but it really wasn't until much later, until I put this idea in action. So after the 2016 election in the US, kind of all my conflict prevention alarm bells were going off in my head, and I knew I had to contribute in some way. And so in 2018, I started with where I was. I emailed my community and I said I wanted to start an experiment called Dinner and Dialogue that I would host out of my apartment in Brooklyn. So the first dinner was held in April 2018, and the theme was comfort. And so people brought their comfort food. And as we ate together, we heard their stories around the dishes and then talked about how else we comforted ourselves, and also the importance of being uncomfortable. And it was a pretty magical night. And I continued to host dinners in my apartment, and then started hosting them in other spaces around the city. So in 2020, I had a grand plan of taking Dinner and Dialogue on the road, which of course, we all had a lot of plans in 2020, but I did get to run a dinner at a gallery space in Reno, Nevada, and a friend's yard in Los Angeles. And I think, though I had run, several dinners by then, this was really the dinner where I thought okay, I think this is really something. The theme was love. And it was a group of people who were pretty new to the idea of dialogue. So I was a little nervous about how they would like it, if people would get into it. But by the end of the night, the whole table was in tears after sharing pretty deeply and listening to other people's stories. And I think it was a good example of what I see in a lot of the programs that I run, that once someone goes there, people follow, so once someone shares pretty vulnerably, usually everyone else kind of follows their lead. So it was cool. But of course, the road show could not happen. COVID hitting in March, everyone's worlds changed. And I switched to virtual pretty quickly. And though it was much different than having, in-person dinners and eating food together, I found that it was still like the conversations were still incredibly rich. And even just talking about food to start off still kind of allowed for like that rich conversation. And also like the opportunity, as we now know, is that it allowed for geographical diversity. So people could join from all over the country, or even, could have some international people join, I think, which really added a lot to the conversations we had. And for the first few months of COVID, and especially when like New York was in like, pretty severe lockdown, I held dinners weekly for people to come together and process the tough circumstances. And I've continued running these virtual gatherings to this day, and they're my, one of like event that like really anyone can join. And also in 2021, after kind of seeing the success of these virtual gatherings and thinking about like the workspace and like kind of the disconnection of like workplace communities, I piloted a program called Lunch Pods, and began running these hour-long programs with teams in different organizations. So currently, I'm running a few different models, but I'm always looking for new contexts and communities to run programs with. But like I said, I'm running virtual lunch pods, and actually I just ran a hybrid lunch pod, which was really interesting. It has a picture of right there, which had like a group of people together in one room, another small group in another room, and then everyone else, virtual. And so that was a really interesting challenge, but still like a really kind of like a rich conversation. I also this summer started a dinner with neighbors model, which is like as a way to get people who live, pretty close to one another back together, to kind of talk to one another and get to know one another and build more community. And I'm actually doing one of those in Brooklyn on Friday. And I have many more ideas for how this model could be used, and I'm always looking for partners and contacts to try it out. So the model, of course, is a little different, depending on, if it's in person or virtual, but like the basic model for dinner and dialogue is that, everyone is invited to bring a story about a food and relate to the theme. And the themes, can be all different sorts, but they can be around home, around community, identity, change, fear, and choice. And then discussions are facilitated with 3 to 5 rounds of questions in relation to the theme. And then questions begin with a theme regarding food, then how it relates to individuals and society. And obviously, if it's a workplace program, then we can like weave some questions about work into there as well. And I think beyond what I've learned myself in running these programs, I think there really is research to back this model around like the power of food and storytelling. I mean, just starting with the fact that like eating together is literally the oldest human ritual. And that food is, obviously an important part of my identity. And like we connect, just as I, connected all those foods, from my childhood as part of my identity, we all do that. Also, like eating together really gives us a chance to have like positive interactions. I think it's a space that tends to bring out the best in people. And also that there are real studies that show that cooperation increases between people who eat together. And there is a study that it's obviously about in-person eating, but that if you eat with someone out of shared plates, that like you're more likely to negotiate with them afterwards. Or there was a study based out of firehouses that looked at that teams who actually ate together then worked better together. And of course, the exchange of stories and how powerful that is. And that's not anything new for this crowd, but how that, if you hear someone's story and you connect with it, that like you're really like, you can almost like feel what they've been feeling, right? And you can develop empathy and mutual understanding, which is incredibly powerful and important. So what I've found that these programs allow for is, a space for people to learn more about each other. I see that they really help build communication and listening skills. They create connection, build community, and strengthen senses of belonging. They build empathy, trust, and resilience. and provide a safer space for participants to listen to different perspectives. And I think what I've learned kind of like over the course of like my education and work in this field is that like on the steps on the road to violence and conflict is dehumanization. And like the only way that humans can do such terrible things to one another is that they don't see these people of this group of the other as being as human as them. And if we're put in a situation where we're allowed to see the humanity in someone, we're allowed to listen to them, to connect with them over a story, we're more likely to not be okay if this person or someone in this person's group is harmed. So I just think that providing spaces for this is incredibly important, especially like where we are today with so much division and conflict. And also, as I said before, like it provides a space that I think cultivates curiosity. And if you literally cannot be curious and fearful at the same time. So I think in order to be open to a new perspective, you can't have someone like shout at you, right? Like that's when like your defenses go up, right? You have to like be curious, be a little bit more relaxed, and like kind of like to be open to those like aha moments. And eating and sitting around a table, even a virtual one, helps to promote an atmosphere of openness and curiosity. So now it is your turn. I would love to hear from all of you about a food that represents an aspect of your identity. And I'll start it off with here's, like I said, ice cream cakes were a big part of my childhood. And this is actually an ice cream cake that my sister made for me a couple of years ago. And we did not have too many sweets growing up, and we did not go out to eat too much, but we did go to get ice cream. So it was always kind of an event. And so I think kind of like this idea of like making simple or having like simple things, making something special is a big part of my identity. And I see this in the humble ice cream cake. So if you would like to contribute to this conversation, I would ask you to please raise your hand. Or if you would like to, you could share your answer in the chat. Julianne, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Listen, there's so many points you just made that now I know why when I found you and connected with you, it was just amazing. When we can speak the same language and use the same terminology. And I love your term about the other, because I write about the importance about being the other. And one of the first stories I wrote was about learning at a Cuban table with friends in high school. I got invited to meet with my girlfriends. And I now realize the mother was probably more terrified about what I was going to influence her daughters than what I was just worried about how I was going to get to the place. And my mother was worried about why you go into that neighborhood, et cetera. And what I learned across the table through translation is the mother asked me, are you a good girl? Are you studying hard? Are you going to go to college? Do you have a boyfriend? Don't get into trouble. And through that, I realized how much we were invested and worried about the same things. But one of my favorite food things, just to digress for a second, and this food they made I can never find again because it's like real home cooking, was we had neighbors. I grew up in Queens, in case my accent doesn't portray this, where the knock on the shingles next door was the most amazing thing, because it meant our German neighbor had baked a cake, and it was a lemon cake. And then the neighbors in that neighborhood, they were always making something raspberry jam, and they were sharing it with us, which was totally good. So it just made us feel special. I didn't have the joy of having grandparents around, so they were like my mini extended adopted family. So that's I have many food memories. Anyone who meets me knows they just own the whole show. But thank you. This is great. So who's up next? Who's going to be brave and courageous and put your hand up and talk?
David.
I grew up in the suburbs of St. Louis, and it was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, about 80% Jewish, mostly apartment buildings. The folks that were, if we weren't Jewish, you were either Greek Orthodox, that was about 15%, and then the remaining 3 or 4% were a mix of the Germans and Italians and whatever. But the wonderful thing about it, because this is pre-air conditioned building days, all the windows were always open. And you smelled everything, all of the things that wafted through the air. And going to school with people, the grade school was about 5 blocks away that I walked to, and you'd get all these aromas. And as a child, the wonderful thing was that from Rosh Hashanah through Greek Orthodox Christmas, which is a long time, you kind of were off school because most of the school was off because of the Jewish holidays, and then they took off for the Christian and Greek Orthodox holidays. So, but you had all these foods, and every time you walked by, first the Greek moms, and I had many, many mothers. I had Jewish mothers, I had Greek mothers, and if you did something wrong, by the time you got back to your house, don't worry about it because they know everything. But the Jewish mothers, they would make all these food, and they would always say, eat. It's just like Italians, eat more, eat more. But it was always the adventure of trying something totally different. I'm a German background, and so we had lots of fowl and pheasant and sauerkraut and that type of stuff. You go to the other houses and you got this feeling of adventureness of going to each house and trying what they had, and just learn to respect what they had and their traditions, and vice versa. Everybody kind of melded together because you had to. So.
That's beautiful. So Ellen, I see a team put her hand up. So you're up on deck.
Yes, thank you so much. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey called Lakewood, in the home of my paternal grandparents. And I grew up in an extended family system where I had aunts and uncles and cousins all around me, and all making sure that I didn't go astray. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. But I'm thinking about two of my favorite foods, and I have many foods that I love, but two in particular: the sweet potato pie, which I normally associate with Thanksgiving, but it comes up on other holidays as well, and potato salad. I love potato salad. And I'll share one story with you. I have a cousin who is gifted in the kitchen, and she was known for her culinary brilliance and excellent potato salad. But one day, as we were preparing for a Thanksgiving dinner, I think I was the one who first sampled the potato salad, and it tasted funny. It was like, something is off with this potato salad. It turns out that instead of putting a little bit of sugar in, there was detergent in a cup, and she put a little bit of detergent in her potato salad. Well, she found out about it, and we ribbed her for many years to come about that potato salad. At any rate, just wanted to share that story.
Oh my goodness, so many things to resonate. And now we have, and thank you. And I'm starving right now, by the way. I'm like, okay, so Julia, unmute yourself because you're next up on deck.
Hey, y'all. So I don't think I got to actually answer the question of how the heck I'm here, but I work with the Othering and Belonging Institute, which is based on Berkeley's campus. Some of you may know about it, some of you may not. It's all about bringing people together across difference. And one of my colleagues, Ashley Gallegos, had met with Ellen and was like, you need to talk to this person because you won't shut up about food. And yeah, really excited to be here. I have some similar sort of having the opportunity to have been in different cultures. I was born in New Orleans, then lived in Senegal, then Massachusetts, then North Carolina. Then I did 2 years in Morocco, and now I'm in California. So like the amount of different foods that I have had the opportunity to sample is wild. And tea, I also want to like agree with Ellen, like the making of the tea, the founder of OBI has this great story about how Nelson Mandela helped deal with conflict by making a general tea. So that's a whole different philosophy, but I want to share that when I was living in Morocco, I got very close to this one family. I would, help their daughter with English, and of course they would always be cooking for me, and they would try to teach me how to cook, which I loved. And I learned how to make this dish called rafisa, which is basically if you're unfamiliar with Moroccan cuisine, it's sort of like there's a naan type bread that they have. It's like a flat type bread. You make that like a day ahead of time, and then you rip it up when it's stale. And then you make in a pressure cooker the most delicious chicken with fenugreek and cumin and all of these spices, and it simmers in this sauce. And then when it's done, you pour it over these ripped up pieces of this kind of bread, and the bread just soaks it up, and it's amazing. But it is an intensive process. And I follow this woman around in a kitchen taking notes. This is across, she's only speaking Moroccan Arabic. I'm attempting to also speak Moroccan Arabic, and there it's a notes in my iPhone, like little notes thing. And then I got back and I made it. I went briefly home during my time in Morocco for 2 weeks, and I made it for my family. And I was able to go back to Morocco and show her and be like, look, this is a picture of this dish and my parents in front of it. And, you know, she ended up getting to meet my parents because they came to visit. But otherwise, these folks who would have never like connected were able to eat. I'm not going to say the same. My cooking skills were not at the level of a Moroccan mom, but like, yeah. So that was really special.
That's so wonderful. So nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming.
I've been meaning to email you.
Yeah, I was like, we should talk, but we'll talk later. Yeah, thank you. That made me really hungry.
This is so beautiful and so uplifting. Who's up next that hasn't wagered? Because I'm sure many of us will be happy with the second roundup. Who hasn't raised? Oh, Sarah, definitely unmute yourself. Please,
Well,
thank you.
what comes to mind immediately is Spritz cookies at Christmas. So that's something that my family made forever with the thingy that puts out the different ribbons and different. You know what I mean, I hope.
I grew up with the word thingy because my mother's not from this country. So that was the substitute verb. It was a verb, a noun, pronoun sometimes. So go for it. We get it.
So it's a cylinder that you put the cookie dough in, and then it's got different ends. So you can have stars, you can have worms, or you can have ribbons. So that's a lovely thing that we do every Christmas still, my husband and I, and my sister and her children and my nieces, and it's a big thing that we share those cookies every Christmas. So I'm already thinking about that.
Wonderful. That's
Thank
so
you.
Thank you.
Ellen, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. This is
so
what
happy.
an obvious thing, sharing food. We share ourselves, of course. So thank you.
Simple. Sometimes the simple things are the most powerful.
Right.
Yeah. Anyone else? And Charlie, I do see your questions, but I'm just going to wait until after this before I answer them. But Charlie, do you want to share a story about food? No?
No.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Jane Ann or Emma, Jane Ann, do you want to jump in? Or also, I don't want to put anyone on the spot too.
Yeah. Favorite food. You can even just say the dish and we'll ask you a ton of questions.
I'll hop in. So I'm here in the South in Texas, and so it's hard to pick. It feels like I don't feel like any culture is my own. Like I have Venezuelan background. One of them that's really lovely. Actually not that close to my culture because I'm not with my dad, but one that we did pick up and our family continues to this day is we eat arepas for breakfast on Christmas. And the irony is that I'm not sure if that's actually traditional for Christmas, but it's very traditional Venezuelan food. And so it does bring our family together. And that's kind of different. But I actually feel like just being like where I am, like Tex-Mex and like just having like chips and queso with people, like is one of like the most bonding things that I do like with others outside of my family. So yeah.
I am so hungry after this conversation.
I know.
Luckily, East Coast time, I'm gonna go eat lunch. It's gonna work out.
Yeah, I had a little something beforehand, so I wouldn't be like chewing the wood here. But it's crazy because like in Queens, I always say it's ethnic overdrive because we have all these nationalities and you end up having cravings for everybody else's food when you see it. And it's so beautiful just to hear you look at your face light up, Jamie. You talked about you're like can picture yourself at the table hanging out.
Oh yeah.
Drippy
Exactly.
cheese and everything, and arepas. There was some I Argentinian, Chile, Peruvian, it doesn't matter. It's all good. And everyone's got their spin on something and own their recipe. My mother-in-law used to, I couldn't understand. My husband's from Dublin. I'm from here. I'm first generation, like Polish, Lithuanian. And you couldn't go anywhere in Ireland. We would resonate with you without a cup of tea. And I was like, nothing's getting but you have a tea and those cookies, the biscuits they call it. And I love them. I just would inhale and go over to the auntie's house and just be so praying they serve me one of those things. So what's up next, Ellen? What else are we gonna do?
I want to allow Emma if she wants to contribute, but also she might not be. That's okay. I mean, I think Emma, hello. Do you want to share?
I've been kind of trying to multitask, but
I appreciate you joining, even though if you're in the middle of a work call. I appreciate you joining.
I have a lot of foods that bring a lot of good memories to me. But one food my family always ate on special occasions is store-bought, but it's hell of a good dip, which is this French onion dip that was a very special treat that we could never otherwise have. And if we were eating it, it meant that we were celebrating something. So yeah, that's a food that will always hold a special place in my heart. So I ate it a lot during COVID and I needed to be comforted.
Oh, lovely.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, that I think just open up if any of you have any questions. This would be the time to do it. So I just want to, so Charlie had put into the chat, what's the basis of my invitation choices to a D&D, and do participants, are they told the theme of the D&D before they're coming to? So basis, so I have traditionally, when I do like kind of like open events, like the virtual gatherings, I write around a theme and send it out to my listserv. So yeah, so people are very aware of the theme, before they come. And even like if I'm doing something with like a work group, like I'll write a little prompt around the theme that's given to the participants a few days before, so that way they can start kind of thinking about it. And like they're always kind of prompted, like, please bring a story around this theme, about a food around this theme. Like, so people are prompted to come with that before. So anyone, okay. Yeah, anyone else have any questions?
I have a question of just like you talked about wanting to like work with folks and do collaboration based things. When you envision that, like how do you, I'm saying that because I run poetry workshops and I'm like, ooh, plus poetry. So yeah, like what kind of stuff have you gotten to engage with before?
I think it's something, yeah, like I've been, I did not start a nonprofit, but I love working with nonprofits. And I however, kind of like, I feel like my model can help help their mission. So I think, some of it is like working with staff, right? So like I'm working with a staff that I do other work for. In a couple of weeks, we're going to do like some like in-person lunch pods where we're going to like cook a little bit before and then sit down and share a meal and talk about home with them. So that's why so working with staff is one way. I think also kind of like using it as a way to like promote their work. So like bring people together around sort of like their mission, which can, I think, help with like development or help with just kind of like raising awareness and kind of like giving people sort of kind of making them feel a part of, I think, the mission in a different way. But then also working with like their participants, right? Like, so if I think like if there is maybe already a program where you're trying, you're like working with a group of people and you want to maybe like do something before it. I think it's a good thing to do before you do something else, I think too, because I think it's a good way for people to get to know each other, especially if it's going to be, something kind of tough, I think too, because like it kind of like sets the foundation to kind of like build a little bit of trust, build some camaraderie, get to know each other kind of before that. But I think there's so many different ways. And also I think I'm open to it being tweaked, right? So like poetry, ooh, like I would have to think about that, but I'm sure we could like infuse poetry into it. And, so I think that's I think it's about kind of like being a little bit creative about it, but I think right now that's kind of how I've done it. It all, as being sort of like a trust building, team building experience, either for the people who are, working in organizations or for like the people that they're working with. Does that make sense, Julia? Great.
You've reminded me about something, and anybody who knows me personally knows I build relationships on whether somebody's cooked for me, fed me, brought me food, etc. So it's a big integral, and also vice versa. But there was a moment I remember years ago, I was in graduate school and I took this very intense group dynamics class based on NTL, where you have to be silent, and it's a long weekend process, and it's like off the charts things happen during the whole dynamics, but there was no food. And I remember going with a bunch of people to this Pakistani restaurant near Columbia University and eating the hottest food in my life and just drinking water. And that solidified me. But the next time I did a similar group dynamics class, it was a little less stressful. And the thing that relaxed me from the beginning is when I walked into the room, there was food out and snacks, and I went, this is going to be okay. So it was that cue, relax, you're good. I mean, both were amazing. Both had so many lessons, but it was that natural primal, they're feeding us, this might be okay. They're going to ease us into stuff this time around. So yeah, so many things. And we could just go on forever. This is like, this could be a multi-part series.
Free food is powerful. Free food is powerful.
I know. It just says so much. Yeah.
Several years ago, I was in Lynchburg, Tennessee, something right up your alley here. And that's where Jack Daniels was made. And
Yes.
I was doing some business consulting for them, but they took us to a restaurant called Miss Mary Bobo's Restaurant. And it was all family style. You sat down with perfect strangers, and you had a host at the head of all the tables. So there might be 10 or 12 people at the table. Nobody knows anybody basically. But the host was there to say, well, Ellen, tell me about your background. Well, tell me about your background, Sarah. And to get people during dinner to talk with perfect strangers, besides the food was terrific Southern food, but the whole concept is just what you described among strangers. So if you're ever down there, Miss Mary Bobo's.
Sounds delicious. Yeah, I'd love to try that out. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's good to hear, David. Was there anyone else? Sarah, did you have a question?
Just, yeah, as an educator preparing professional development sessions, it's always, what food are we bringing? Because as you've said, it makes it a welcoming, it's making a welcoming place, and it's diffuses perhaps whatever, and a chance at the end of the day or whenever it is to just take a breath. So always important.
Yeah, and I think it's an opportunity. I think sometimes, obviously meals are great no matter what happens, right? But like having some structure around it, and like having like a facilitator, I think gives kind of everyone knows they're gonna have a chance to talk and to listen, which I think gives, in different group dynamics, right? There's sometimes people that talk all the time, right? And there's sometimes people who don't contribute enough. And so I think kind of like having someone else sort of make sure that everyone gets a chance, even if they don't have to talk. But I just think that kind of allows for a different dynamic, So I'm a believer in facilitation at times, a little bit of structure.
That is so key, because in the narrative storytelling method, they talk about the room and the experiences is like the container to shapes the conversation. And then all the bits of structure is not to prevent serendipity or sharings. It's just to give it a chance to really thrive. So what you're saying, it just resonates on such a big level. And it gives that person the safety to know that, somebody's like looking out for them too, and making sure they're heard and appreciated.
Yeah, great. I saw a hand up before. Did someone else, Etienne, did you want to share something or?
Also looking.
Totally, yeah, but that's fine. So yeah, but thank you all for this. This has just been fun to learn about you too. I think also it's just really fun to learn about people. And I think food is just one way. I think it's not the only way, right?
It's the way. It's the way. That's good. So
But I
what else
think-
can we learn about what you're doing? Let's use this moment for you, what you're working on and what you're doing. So let's lose a little bit of this platform before we close and give our wrap up and tell what we're doing next. So why don't you do that? What's in the hopper for you?
Well, I think obviously I'm getting back into doing some in-person dinners and programs, which has been great. And so I think that's been a good challenge, kind of to negotiate like how to do that safely and in a way that makes everyone feel comfortable. Also kind of been doing some hybrid ones, which has been really interesting because I think like in some ways that's the way forward for a little while with our world, like hybrid dynamics. And so kind of trying to figure out how best to do that and how to not make it something that's just that we have to do, but actually like where's the opportunity in that, I think. But really I'm looking for ways to bring this to different contexts and looking for organizations to partner with and like to experiment in different communities around kind of like how it could work for people. So that's really what I'm meeting with people, I'm talking to people, I'm running demos, planning different events. So yeah, that's really where I am. So I think, I think it's if people are interested in learning more, they're welcome to get in touch. And I'd love to, to set up maybe a Zoom cup of tea, and we can talk more about it. But yeah, I mean, it's still, I want to see where it could go, but also like, where it makes sense, right? You know what I mean? I think also like, I want to see like, where it could resonate. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Oh, sorry, for Sarah.
Ellen,
Yes.
Ellen, go ahead and put your email in the chat, please.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's the little things sometimes. And it is in the newsletter too that we sent out and it's on LinkedIn because I blasted us out there. So in a few different places, and you can find us, and then we'll have it on the website as well. We'll get the recording up.
Ellen, do you have any resources or references for any of this activity?
Yeah, I have some like one pagers and like documents I put together. Yeah.
Could you share with us? Okay.
Yeah, I could send them to Julia and she can send them out. Yeah. Yep. I do. Absolutely have some resources. Yeah.
Charles, give us your email. I know we probably have it tucked away someplace, but let's put it in the chat so Sarah and I can grab it.
The email? Yeah.
Yeah, Charles' email. Charlie's email.
Charles' email. Yeah, absolutely.
So who's going to run to the kitchen or out to the store or the restaurant right after this?
And did you see Emma's question? How can we get invited to your next event?
Oh yes, let's shout that
If
one
you
out.
want to go to my my website is dinneranddialogue.org. So I'll put that in there too. www.dinneranddialogue.org. You can sign up to be on my newsletter, and then you'll be on my mailing list, and you'll find out about future events. Yeah, because I do run these virtual gatherings that anyone can come to. And then I've started doing them, more for different groups as well. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Well, Alan, I can assure you this is not a one and done on your side. And then look at the faces of us, happy people here. So thank you for that. Sarah, why don't we take a moment? We have still a few minutes, but I just want to segue before we digress too far, just to say what's coming up next month. So we have a speaker organized for the November 17th. It's a Thursday again at high noon Eastern Standard Time. Sarah, can you pull his name up correctly so I don't just paraphrase it? It's Yari Bovalino. Okay, so you're coming. Okay, good. And name of his company, because it's a long one.
It's going to take me a second, so talk among yourselves.
Yes, he's the head communications officer in a division of GE. It's in the aeronautics space. So he'll be talking about storytelling and communications in a whole different segment with a very complex, multi-dimensional world. So we do go from yin to yang on a lot of things, but it's all related on the surface. It's connecting people. Anything when Sarah's ready, she'll give us the formal name of his company, so don't paraphrase it. I'm sorry, I put you on the spot. That wasn't fair. I was trying not to make up a name, so I should have had it ready for us too. But anyway, it's going to be good. And any suggestions? What happens also coming up the pike in December, which sounds far away, but it's not, and it's wild when I think about it, is every year we do a story swap, which is a way of not having to do a speaker, but also giving everybody a platform. So what we are looking for is a theme. Like a team came up with a great theme last year. A team, you come up with it, and you would say it. Are you there?
I'm here, but goodness knows I can't remember what it was.
We're doing really well. I think it was about change and possibility, and there was some other layer to it they were doing, but it was quite compelling about what was going on in our environment. But what we do is we do swap stories, and it can be from any period of your life, and sharing and just having that moment of, getting out there and being creative and having a new platform. And then Sarah just put the full name of our guest coming up in the chat room. So we do like to make things happen in special ways. And then to all of you, you can come back and be part of that and bring a story with you. And we're very flexible, as you probably guessed by now. It all works, and it all connects with each other in a certain way. I do say, like, the best stories are already in the room. What we're doing is just hoping that we're creating an atmosphere that allows people to be relaxed and comfortable and feel safe. So Julia, Emma, Jane, don't be strangers. Charlie, you'll be back, I know, and David, and all the others who are not on the call today, and Emma, who listen in on their own time. It's a nice and wonderful community that spans the globe. So this is terrific. So Sarah is the wing girl and the wonderful person is always on point for me. Oh, here we go. Wow, you are so awesome. Yari is the Senior Communications Manager, Chief Storytelling of Avio Aero and GE Aviation Turboprop, and you wonder why we weren't able just to roll that off our tongues right away. So we do have an excuse here now that you've seen it in print. So I'm going to have a huge crib note in front of me on that day. But it's interesting to hear the backstory and what gets people to do what they do. Any last questions, thoughts, guys? This is your time to do this. Raise your hand, speak up, shout out. Ellen, Sarah, Charlie.
The good news, the elections are almost over, and we'll end all those phone calls that you get continually from whatever party it is you hear from or don't want to hear from, and it's almost over.
Yes, and change and add to the conversation. So I think Ellen's presence here, there's a method to my madness too about who we invite and show up to. I think we need to clone Ellen. That should be on our top of our list, to clone Ellen in many shapes and forms, and many like her, to get people sitting down and talking to each other and making some good sustainable change that includes everybody in the mix. So Julia, wonderful for you to join us, as I said, and everyone else here. Yes, ma'am.
I am really curious about the organization that Julia is affiliated with. I've already gone over to the website. I've already sent a link to the arts program that you have, Seeding Hope, to a friend of mine who was telling me that she's feeling a little down today. So maybe we can invite Julia or a representative from Cal Berkeley, to join us as a resource person.
You know what, team, it's like I paid you $5 under the table to say that, because that's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to be too pushy because you already gave me that.
Julia, I warned Ellen about the slippery slope.
You were part of it. You're part of the chain. She's handed it off to somebody. Thank you so much. I said nothing. I didn't slack check her. I didn't touch her. I did nothing. This is all her own idea, but she's on point. So what do you say, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, I do not have my elevator speech prepared right now because I am not caffeinated enough, but I'm going to pop my email in the chat, and anyone feel free to email me. I would love to talk more about this. Storyteller to storytellers.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm so excited. Thanks, the team, for being a mind reader. Thanks so much. All right, guys. Okay, let's get her email here. Julia, I'm gonna write this down. So in the final moments, as I've said a couple of times, but the right things keep coming up. I am so delighted. I'm smiling, I'm energized. I am just like so happy this came together. And this is, Ellen, you're the example of the power of Google sometimes, because I was throwing words out about food and something I was working on, and there you are, popped up in cyberspace, and it's been terrific. So thanks for the bravery of picking up a phone call and an email. Responding, and welcome to the other part of your community too now. All righty.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you all for coming, because it does take bravery to show up and, you know, share your story and talk to strangers. So I just want to say that I appreciate all of you, and yeah, I hope you guys have a good week and a good meal today, I think.
Absolutely. And till we meet again, absolutely. See you in 3D, 2D, 1D. Awesome. Be safe and well. Cheers. All the best.